where are we on the timeline in chapter 9? Just so everybody's on the same page. This is right after they've come off the boat in chapter 8. Noah built an altar, made a sacrifice, and now God blesses, in verse 1, God blesses Noah and his sons and starts to kind of lay out what life's going to look like for them post-flood, right? All right, so in chapter 9, what I see is like 3 different scenes in chapter 9. You've got the post-flood blessing, the new covenant, and toward the end of chapter 9 is Noah's patriarchal blessing and subsequent cursing of Canaan as well. So, in the second half of verse 1, there's a familiar phrase there, and Emily's translation didn't say it exactly the way it does in mine, but I'll read it. It says, God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Where do we hear that command from God previously? We've heard that before. Where did we hear that before?
Right after creation.
Adam and Eve, right. And you'll see in chapter 9 some other parallels as well of what, happened in the garden and similar circumstances to the garden. But the biggest thing that jumps out for me right here in the first part of chapter 9 is in verse 2. There's a very interesting shift that happens in verse 2. It says, the fear and terror of you will be in every living creature on the earth, every bird of the sky, every creature that crawls on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. They are placed under your authority. So, by God making that statement, it has to, I don't know that it necessarily says it that clear pre-flood, in the garden. But here in verse 2, it says that the animals are now going to have fear of man. Every animal on the earth is going to fear man going forward. He has placed a fear. The fear and terror of you will be in every living creature on the earth. Every bird of the sky, every creature that crawls on the ground, all the fish of the sea, they are placed under your authority. So that tells me pre-flood, they didn't have fear of man. Mm-mm. Right? So that might shine some light on the situation of Noah getting the animals into the ark. They didn't have fear of man prior to the flood. That kind of paints an interesting picture of Noah putting the animals on the boat and then living with all these animals on this boat for all these, however long it was, I can't remember now. Living with all the animals on the boat, they did not fear man. They were submissive, but were not fearful. Does that make sense?
I love this here. It shows these are the enduring work up there, and it says if now man is good at woody animals, God will help animals. God will drive mankind to death.
You're getting ahead of me again. So, in verse 2, animals go from being submissive in chapter 1 pre-flood to being fearful in chapter 9 post-flood. Why did God make them fearful? Say it again, John. To level the playing field. To level the playing field when being hunted. And to also allow us to subdue the earth. If you think about a horse, I don't remember what I was listening to when I was studying for this. Something I was listening to, they gave this scenario. You think about a horse. If a horse understood the power dynamic difference between their size and strength and our size and strength, how many horses would we be able to break and ride if they knew that they could shut us down in a heartbeat? But they have this fear in them of us to be submissive to us. There's a fear in there built into them from chapter 9 that allows us to subdue them. If they did not fear us, I don't think that things would look the way they look today. All right, so animals are now also given to Noah and his sons and descendants as food. and Adam was only given plants. Why do we think that is? Anyone? Well, I'll give you my speculation, because that's all it is speculation. But I would imagine that the post-flood world looked much different after it's been submerged, right? I mean, you're going to see here soon that Noah planted a vineyard and some time had passed, but as they're right off the boat, imagine the world looked different than it did when they went on the boat, right? When they went on the ark. So did God allow eating animals as a supplement to the fact that there's nothing really growing right now? There's nothing or not enough growing right now. That's one side of my speculation. Another speculation is that plants in and of themselves were not as nutritious as they were pre-flood.
And weren't going to be because the sun.
The ecosystem. All right, so let me find out where I'm at here. Some say that some speculate that the water that fell from the sky was a vapor of firmament that would have created a much different ecosystem for farming and wild plants. The ecosystem pre-flood was probably more conducive to plant life. A corn plant might have been 10 foot tall and had 100 pounds of corn on it. Life was just different, before the flood, more than likely. Post-flood ecosystem, while still functional, may not have been as conducive to plant life as it was before. All right, moving on. Verse 4 says, however, you must not eat with its lifeblood in it, and I will require a penalty for your lifeblood. Noah is instructed to not partake in the lifeblood of the animal. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
Well done.
Yeah, well done.
Well, see, that's the thing. I don't eat myself.
Well, that's not blood anyway, but that's a side quest. That's not blood. But anyway, why do you think God says not to partake of the blood? It's okay to eat everything else, but not the blood. Why is that?
That's the life-sustaining aspect of it.
Ari said, because it's disgusting. There's life in the blood. And there is a mystery about blood that I have yet to fully wrap my mind around. I don't know if I ever will fully wrap my mind around it. But blood had to be shed for the atonement of sin in the Old Testament. And Jesus' blood was shed for the atonement of our sin when he died on the cross. There is something about, my question, just being an ADHDer, is like, why did Jesus have to die and shed blood for that? Why couldn't he just speak it? Why couldn't he just declare it? There is something significant about blood. There is a mystery to it that I don't think humanity understands. There's people out there that probably understand it way more than I do, but there's something very significant about blood. You see in the Old Testament people that lived 900 years, 800 years, and today we live 80 at best. It's my speculation that the effect that sin had on our bloodstream in the Garden of Eden has been compounded throughout history. And you have a sinful woman and a sinful man have a sinful child, and that sinful child marries another sinful human being, and they have a sinful child. And that effect, that physical effect on the blood, on the DNA of humanity, has been compounded throughout the years, and what has gotten us the disease and the issue, the health issues that we deal with today, I believe started in the Garden of Eden. Then copies of copies, yeah. I don't really like, going back to my question. It says Noah is instructed to not partake in the lifeblood of animals, and what are our thoughts on that? I don't really know the answer. I just know there's something significant about blood. And anytime I've ever had this conversation before, somebody inevitably is going to say, well, the life is in the blood. Well, I agree with that. But there's something more to it. There's more detail there that I would love to know about. And we don't typically eat animals that have got above average intelligence as well, like dogs and cats and, things that have been domesticated. And in my study, I listened to something along those lines as well, but it didn't jump out as important. So I did not document it. But if I can find what I was listening to, I'll be glad to send it to you. But it kind of explains some of that.
I mean, I know why I don't eat it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I think, at least for us, there was law against certain unclean animals, the split-hooved animals, and that it was in a very exhaustive list of what Jews could and could not eat. And I think mostly what we abide by today is just cultural. It's not really, because God told Paul, I think it's Paul, don't call unclean what I call clean. Was that right? Peter. Is it Peter? Yeah. Don't call unclean what I made. Don't call anything I made unclean. So that was abolished with the new covenant, I would say. But at the same time, we still have some cultural, tendencies. Every culture, like they eat freaking bats in China, and we don't here. So it's a.
Well, Piggy.
see, I was just wondering, like, if there was scripture later on says that.
There was, and you think about the context and the time frame that they were living in when those laws were given to them. It was about, the word escapes me, but sanitation. It was not going to be safe for them to eat those animals at that time, and if they did, it would probably more than likely introduce a lot of disease and stuff into their culture. So I'd say, things that we don't eat today is just culture. It's cultural more than it is anything. Why do we think that horse is gross? Or can't, I don't know.
What it boils down to is the blood of Christ was introduced again, the second Adam, like we were talking about earlier, and we're purified there because the veil was torn. The Holy Spirit's available to all people now, and that's how we receive that.
Okay, so there's in verse 5 it says, "And I will require a penalty for your lifeblood. I will require it from any animal and from any human. If someone murders a fellow human, I will require that person's life." Verse 6, "Whoever sheds human blood, by humans his blood will be shed, for God made humans in his image." So what is God introducing right there that a lot of people don't like to talk about? Capital punishment. If you shed someone's blood, your blood will be shed. I don't know that modern culture gets it right a lot of times, but anybody that wants to argue with you on capital punishment being Jesus wouldn't do that, take them right there. And God closes this first scene repeating himself in verse 7. It says, but you be fruitful and multiply, spread out over the earth and multiply on it. So he repeats himself. Why do you think he repeats himself? Same reason we repeat ourselves to our kids. We want them to listen. Then God said to Noah and his sons with him, "Understand that I am establishing my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, birds, livestock, and all wildlife of the earth that are with you, all the animals of the earth that come out of the ark. I establish my covenant with you that never again will every creature be wiped out by floodwaters. There will never again be a flood to destroy the earth." So God is establishing his covenant with who? He's not only establishing his covenant with Noah and his descendants, but of all the animals on the earth as well. How many other times in the Bible do we know of God establishing a covenant with animals? Yeah. I don't know of one. So that's very interesting to me, that not only did he establish a covenant with Noah, his descendants, humanity basically, He also established a covenant with the cows and the mean horses and the goats. John's favorite.
Yeah. Does anyone?
Would you consider this a covenant with the serpent, or is that just?
All right, so this is kind of scene 2 of chapter 9, is where God establishing his covenant. I'll back up to verse 8 and we'll read through it again. If anybody has a comment or question, just yell out. It says, then God said to Noah and his sons with him, understand that I am establishing my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, birds, livestock, and all wildlife of the earth that are with you, all the animals of the earth that came out of the ark. I establish my covenant with you that never again will every creature be wiped out by floodwaters. There will never again be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is a sign of my covenant. I am making between me and you and every living creature with you a covenant for all future generations. I have placed my bow in the clouds, and it will be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I form clouds over the earth and the bow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all the living creatures. Water will never again become a flood to destroy every creature. The bow will be in the clouds, and I will look at it and remember the permanent covenant between God and all the living creatures on the earth. God said to Noah, this is a sign of the covenant that I have established between me and every creature on the earth. So he repeats himself again in that section. He wants you to remember what he's saying here. And what is that sign of his covenant? This may be like splitting hairs and like going off in a direction that we don't really need to go off into. But so growing up, you see the little boat with the little animals and the little rainbow over the top of it, and you get told that this is to remind us of God's covenant with us, that will never be destroyed by a flood again. But what does Scripture say? What does God say in Scripture? Let me find it again. Whenever I form clouds over the earth and the bow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all the living creatures. That was, I don't know what the importance is, but God kind of highlighted that for me when I was reading that. So, right? So, anybody want to add anything else to that about the covenant? I mean, it's pretty cut dry, pretty black and white. There's not at least with my brain, not a whole lot to unpack there. God made a covenant. He made a sign to represent that covenant for him and us to remember. And that's the rainbow. Now, the rainbow has been hijacked for other things in culture, but it's still a symbol of that covenant that the earth wouldn't be destroyed by water. We're in verse 18. It says, Noah's sons who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. That's important. Y'all put that little nugget right here for a second. These three were Noah's sons, and from them the whole earth was populated. Noah, as a man of the soul, began planting a vineyard. He drank some of the wine, became drunk, and uncovered himself inside his tent. So let's pause right there for just a second and kind of paint the picture of what's going on. So they've been out of the ark for at least enough time for a vineyard to grow and to make wine. But being through what they've been through in the last few years, Noah says, I'm going to get drunk on this wine. Gets drunk on this wine, goes into his tent. In his, I don't know how many of y'all are post-alcoholics, but when I got drunk, I was hot. Noah goes into his tent. He's hot. He takes his clothes off and he lays down, right? Passes out. Drunk and passes out. So, Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father naked and told his two brothers outside. Then Shem and Japheth took a cloak and placed it over their shoulders. Walking backward, they covered their father's nakedness. Their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father naked. So Noah plants a vineyard, gets drunk, goes into his tent, gets naked, and passes out. Ham sees his father and his nakedness, and at this, through most of the Old Testament, and even today, nakedness was equated to shame. Go back to the Garden of Eden. What did Adam and Eve tell God when he asked them where were they, or why did they hide? Because they didn't say because we were guilty. They didn't say because we sinned. They said because we're naked. So nakedness is equated with shame. So Ham sees his father, and rather than provide him with dignity and safety by covering him, he immediately goes to his brothers and talks trash on them. Immediately goes to his brothers and shames them. Y'all ought to see what the old man is doing over there, up naked in the tent over here, passed out drunk. Right? He's having fun, shaming his father. But, and side note, there's speculation from other scholars that there was more that went on than just seeing him. It's speculation. The Bible doesn't tell us that. It tells us that he saw him and that he went and told his brothers. So there's, do your own research on that, come to your own conclusion on that. But there is other scholars that speculate that Ham actually sodomized his father. I don't see that in the text, but the only thing that lets me entertain that notion more than just a second is that if we move forward to 24, it says Noah woke from his drinking and learned what his youngest son had done to him. That's gray enough to maybe support that, you could assume that he knew what he had done because his other sons told him. But yeah. And this is the man that God chose to save, and he destroyed everything else on the earth. Noah was righteous in God's eyes, and here he is I say moments, but if you take this whole picture at once, moments after God using him to carry on humanity, is now drunk and naked in his tent in a sinful state when he was the only righteous man on earth prior to this. Shem and Japheth covered their father without seeing his nakedness, covering his shame and restoring his dignity, much like what God did for Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. In my research for this, there is an amazing video on YouTube that I highly recommend everybody go watch. It's R.C. Sproul. Take that for what it is, but it's a good video. And if anybody wants the link to it, I'll send it. I'll put it in the group chat or whatever. He doesn't necessarily, like, he's preaching the gospel using this text, so he doesn't go into a lot of detail on some of the other parts of the text here. But this particular section, what I'm calling scene 3 of chapter 9, he goes into a lot of detail and makes a beautiful connection to the gospel in this story. And like I said, I will send everybody that video. I watched it again last night just to kind of refresh myself on it. It's amazing. Y'all should go check it out. So Noah curses Canaan when he finds out what his son done to him, his youngest son. Why did he curse Canaan and not Ham? Because Ham's the one that did it. So why did Noah wake up, sober up, get dressed, and curse Canaan? That doesn't seem logical at face value. Why did he curse Canaan instead of Ham? Well, it could also be taken as a lighter punishment because he cursed a third of Ham's lineage instead of all of it. If he would have cursed Ham, he would have cursed all of Ham's descendants, but instead he cursed a third of Ham's descendants. But also, if you look back in verse 1 of chapter 9, it said God blessed Noah and his sons. So for Noah to have cursed Ham, he would have cursed what God had blessed. Right? Does that make sense? So that would kind of be icky and bad, and I wouldn't do that, right? Don't curse what God has blessed. So he cursed Ham's son Canaan, which also, like I said, was a bit of a was lenient in a lot of ways, because he, like I said, he cursed a third of Ham's lineage instead of all of it.
I thought I was looking back to the reminder.
But I don't know. I don't know that it. I'm not saying that you're wrong there, but I don't know that it wasn't like. Was Noah actively prophesying, or is God honoring what Noah said? Like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did God show Noah that, or were the Canaanites destined to be servants because of it, or both? God knows all and sees all at the same time, so he knew all of this all at one lick. So just so everybody understands, and this curse is fulfilled in Joshua when the Israelites capture Canaan and make them servants. They were woodworkers, and
Weren't they the ones that sit there and said, we're not from close by, we're from far away, made a promise? Is that the same?
I can't remember. I read at it. I didn't read fully through it, but. And another little side note on this curse that you can put in your pocket and remember, if you ever come into this situation, this curse has been misrepresented and misinterpreted to justify racism and slavery as well. Because the descendants of Ham are the fathers of Ethiopia, Egypt, Libya, and Canaan, which are black people. And this curse has been misrepresented as a curse on Ham to justify slavery and racism on the black culture, when the curse was not on Ham, it was on Canaan, which was a third of his lineage. So that's just a side quest that I discovered in my research for this, and thought that was pretty good. So chapter 10 sucks because it's all lineage. When I got ready to start this, I was like, John gave me the good ones. No, there's a lot of good stuff in chapter 9, and I cannot stress enough. Y'all go watch the video that R.C. Sproul had. It's an old video from probably the 70s, and it's not great quality, but there's some good stuff in that video tying this story in chapter 9 to the gospel, specifically Canaan's curse and Noah's drunkenness. I will. I'll do it just quick as we get done. So, do y'all want to read through chapter 10 right quick? It's a lot of names. Yeah, it's a lot of names and lineage, and I do believe it's important to understand those lineages, but I'll be flat honest with y'all, I don't yet.
Yeah, let's do it. So, both are in group 10. Let's do a homework assignment. And we've done this before. Let's study it, but next Sunday we come back with a timeline of who these people are from what we've researched. There's power to put that into you understanding what it breaks down instead of sitting here reading it. Everyone, it is hard, but it's important because this is establishing what? What is chapter 10 establish?
This is going to show the lineage to Jesus.
So each one of us, we can write out a time and go through this and say who's who, or you can go on the origin.
I thought I wrote it down. That.
Okay, and then Scott's doing his Tower of Babel next week.
He's doing 11 and 12, right?
Yeah, it's falling off from the Tower of Babel and going to college.
Yeah.
After.
I think you've already studied.
And I love it. This one I love about you, right? We have 3 different unique styles, right? I love it. Scott's going to bring the Pentecost part. We're going to be running around even Jericho marching, aren't we?
Make some bloodline. It'll be like Elevation Church.
But I'm excited for it. But Nate, I would just highlight your important parts. You know, what's the super impactful parts of what stuck out to you, and then let them come back next week and present it in kind. We got to do it that kind of rule. It's not fair to us three Christians. You don't have to spend a whole lot of time on it. Just prove that you did it, and then you can sit there.
Proof that you did.
Yeah. Yes, you have 10 spiritual points. So good ones too. We just have any body, just tested something new here. I started to stop making points. Points. Like going on the grace to God.
I was in Yeti.
All right.
Who's closing in prayer? Not Emily, not Scott, not John, not me.
On the day of the group and learn more about you together, Lord. Let us go throughout this week and do our assignments and the two people that you've been minister to touch, Lord. Bring us all back Tuesday's day, please. And just leave us throughout the week and keep us safe. All these things I surprise and tell you.
Did you all get that message? Speaking of bloodline, do you split Emily out? About worshiping once a month a week?